Welcome to this overview presentation on DoD's peer-reviewed medical research program. First, we want to thank all of the advocates from the International Rett Syndrome Foundation as the Rett Syndrome research community applies for FY22 funding through the PRMRP. We want to thank all of the IRSS advocates for successfully securing Rett syndrome as a topic listed in the fiscal year 22 Defense Appropriations Bill. And I now would like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Brian Pfister, who will walk us through the process.
Great, thank you. Happy to be here today to talk about one of the congressionally directed medical research programs, the peer-reviewed medical research program. Is that advancing? The slides are not advancing. Today, I'd like to cover about the program, the award mechanisms within the program itself, and the details on how to apply, how to develop your proposal to be responsive to the program, cover the review process of an application, and of course, tips for your success. But first, a bit of history about what is the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. They spun out of some appropriations back several decades ago to foster novel approaches to biomedical research in response to the expressed needs of various stakeholders. Some of those stakeholders are foundations such as yourself, the general public, as well as the military. This program was then housed within the Department of Defense to make it different from that found within the National Institutes of Health. Critically, I wanted to remind everyone that the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, and especially the peer-reviewed medical research program, is different than that of the mission of the grants programs within the NIH, in that the NIH is an investigator-initiated research program. The DoD and the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs are requirements-driven programs. This means that as Congress defines the needs of its stakeholders and communicates that within the appropriations, those needs are reflected within the requirements of the program. And as an investigator trying to write a competitive proposal, it is important to understand what those requirements are so that you have a responsive application to the program. So I'll talk a bit more about that. This year, the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs cover a diversity of topics. There are programs ranging from alcohol and substance use to cancer, to Parkinson's, to other topic areas. We're here to talk about the peer-reviewed medical research program, and the scope or the magnitude of funding behind this program is significant. $370 million have been appropriated in fiscal year 2022 for this program. This occurs across 49 health topic areas within the program. So this is the requirements-driven portion of this. That funding is to accomplish a certain vision and mission to this program. And that vision is to improve the health care, the well-being of military service members, veterans, and their beneficiaries. The mission is to encourage, identify, and select and manage medical research projects with clear scientific merit and direct relevance to military health. So one might ask, what does Rett syndrome have to do with military health? So remember, this is a congressionally directed program. So the requirements as received from the stakeholder groups are such that Congress has directed the DoD to fund research in a diversity of topics, including Rett syndrome. List of topic areas for the FY22 peer-reviewed medical research program, all 49 of them. The ones in orange are new for FY22, in which Rett syndrome is a new topic area. So now, as an investigator interested in addressing issues of Rett syndrome and performing research in that area, need to now find an area or find a means to write proposals that are compliant to a DoD managed program. So what the DoD has done this year in this program is group a number of common topic areas under a main heading, in this case, neuroscience. So you'll find Rett syndrome has been grouped with a number of other topic areas under this neuroscience topic area. This is important because the DoD has chosen to manage these funds appropriated by Congress to achieve certain strategic goals. Again, this is the requirements-driven nature of this program. So as an investigator in Rett syndrome, you will need to address one or more of these strategic goals which align to the neuroscience topic area of which Rett syndrome is listed under. These strategic goals range from foundational studies to prevention, to diagnosis, to treatment, to epidemiology. These have not been written specifically for Rett syndrome. These have been written to be generic to the topic area of neuroscience. So as an investigator, one of your first challenges will be to find one of these strategic goals that you may align to, and then tailor a proposal development effort to describe how you best are meeting one of these strategic goals. And I'll go into the review process a little later in the presentation to describe why that is critically important. So again, you need to, as an investigator, align to one of these strategic goals in your proposal development effort. Another characteristic of the peer-reviewed medical research program is that it is intended to foster research across a diversity of maturity levels, ranging from very early stage to very late stage research efforts. These mechanisms have been designed to encourage certain aspects at those various stages of research development. The very early stage research falling under an award mechanism called the Discovery Award. This offers a really good opportunity for early stage investigators, such as postdoctoral fellows, clinical fellows, or the equivalent, as well as the tenure track faculty members, to support either new ideas or unproven research efforts, so high risk, high reward types of projects. To do this, they're offering $200,000 for direct costs. And like all of the congressionally directed programs, your indirect costs that are on top of that. And in the case of Discovery Award, a maximum period performance of 2 years. The pre-application is required. This is a letter of intent. And it's important to understand that a letter of intent is not a reviewed portion of your proposal. A letter of intent is solely to explain to the congressionally directed programs that I intend to submit a proposal. I intend to submit a proposal around this general concept. And this then puts them on notice on how to build a review panel appropriate for the anticipated response to this program. So you could put as few as 3 words on there. I intend to submit. And you would meet the requirements of the letter of intent. Now you may wish to get a little bit more detailed than that because you would benefit from having an appropriate review panel in order to review your proposals appropriately. But it's important to understand, don't put a lot of time and effort into the letter of intent, and don't stress that there isn't a lot of time between when the letter of intent is due and when the application is due. The checklist for the Discovery Award, again, the letter of intent, the project narrative is 5 pages. The technical abstract and the lay abstracts are each 1 pages. The statement of work, 3 pages, an impact statement. Again, this is how your work impacts the Rett syndrome research community broadly, but also remember the very next requirement is relevance to military health. How this may impact military health. In general, topic areas such as Rett syndrome generally don't impact active duty service members. More than likely, those individuals would not be in active duty service. But as the community well knows, Rett syndrome may exist within the family structure, and that hardship of dealing with this disease within the family structure may prevent an active duty service member, for example, from meeting the requirements of their job, having to do what is needed to do for their family members. So oftentimes that becomes a way to describe how this is impactful to military health and that of the service member, veterans, and the broader community. And the broader community is, should here as the family structure, of course, supporting documentation. So Discovery Award is very low burden sort of material to put together for a meaningful amount of funding, $200,000 for a period of performance up to 2 years. Next is the Investigator-Initiated Research Award. You'll see some parallels to this and what I just described for the Discovery Award. Again, a letter of intent is required. This is not a pre-proposal. This is not a full description of what you're doing, just that, a letter of intent. And then the application. The Investigator-Initiated Research Award mechanism is intended to support research that makes an original or important contribution to the field. And there are opportunities to partner, so more than one investigator partnering on a proposal. This is geared towards sort of that assistant professor level or above. So a postdoctoral fellow probably would not be successful in this. The funding budget caps for this, 1.6 million in direct costs for a single investigator. If you go in with a partner, a collaborator on this, and you're at equal level, contribution, then you can request up to 2 million. The period of performance for this is up to 4 years. Because it's a little bit more money, several $1 million, the requirements of the proposal are a bit higher as well. So I mentioned the letter of intent. The project narrative is 15 pages in this case, but you'll see common other requirements, such as I described in the Discovery Award: a technical abstract, a lay abstract, a statement of work, an impact statement, a relevance to military health. If you pursue a partnership, there is a partnership statement required in this case, and then the standard supporting documentation. The next award mechanism, Technology and Therapeutic Development Award, is really intended to support the translation of promising preclinical findings. That translation can be defined many ways. It can either be into clinical trials, up to clinical trials, enabling sort of novel ideas to build the body of evidence necessary to enter clinical trials. Translation can mean many other things as well, though. It might not be for human health. It might be treatment guidelines. So advancing the standard of care, for example, it is a translation of research efforts that might not be clinical trials per se. So the Technology Therapeutic Development Award, as you might imagine, requires a little bit more thought put to how are you translating your ideas to something impactful in the community. There are different funding levels for this. Funding level 1 supports research that is significant, supported by significant preliminary data. That's important. So preliminary data is required in this case. Funding level 2 supports research in the final stages of preclinical development with the potential for near-term clinical development. Now, while the Technology Therapeutic Development Award is not intended to fund clinical trials, it's intended to get you there or to an equivalent point of translation. This again is intended for assistant professor levels. I mentioned the funding level 1 and 2. In this case, a pre-application letter of intent, similar to all the others, is required in the full application. Again, the funding levels are in several million, with funding level 1 being 2 million in direct costs, funding level 2, 4 million. Therefore, again, the requirements of writing become a little bit greater. In this case, the project narrative, 18 pages. Again, the technical and lay abstract, statement of work, impact statement, relevance to military health, all similar to the other programs. But in this case, since it's intended to translate something, a translational plan and a regulatory strategy is required. The proposals will be judged based upon that. And I can tell you from past experience that this award mechanism in general takes those translational plans, those regulatory strategies very serious. So it behooves you to think critically about how you're going to translate something from the bench, perhaps, to something meaningful in clinical care. Now, you may not get all the way to a clinical trial, as I sort of stated, but describing what the next steps are past this, this proposal might be relevant, in your proposal. The clinical trial work comes next. So it builds upon sort of this theme of increasing sort of research maturity. In this case, the clinical trial award, I think, is unique amongst the government in that there is not a funding cap associated with the clinical trial award. You define what funds are required to achieve whatever goals or objectives you propose, and justify that. In this case, the maximum period performance is 4 years, but there is no funding cap associated with this. So you propose what you think you need. There's the opportunity to propose a clinical trial planning award with this as well. This does have a funding cap associated with it. So for our planning proposal, that budget is $500K or less in direct costs. Again, maximum period performance is 4 years. So once again, since we're talking about potentially larger amounts of dollars, the burden of writing becomes greater again. In this case, the pre-proposal, the initial submission is not just a letter of intent, and this is important. This is actually a full pre-proposal. You have a 5-page limit for that. And so you will be invited to submit a full proposal based upon the review of your pre-proposal. That technical project narrative, then, if you're invited to a full proposal, becomes a little bit greater. So if it's a planning clinical trial proposal, that's an 8-page limit. The clinical trial itself is 20-page. You'll notice some of the common other requirements across all of these funding mechanisms: technical and lay abstract, statement of work, relevance to military health, impact statements, and so forth. But you'll notice some other things associated or relevant to clinical trials. So the intervention itself, what are you doing? Describing that. There's no page limit associated with that. The recruitment of human subjects and safety associated with that, no page limit. Data management becomes important to clinical trials, so you might expect that as part of the requirements. The regulatory strategy, these reviewers want to know, have you engaged with in this case, the FDA, if it's in the United States, in an appropriate way? Have you gotten the feedback required to initiate the study in a reasonable time frame? What would be the transition of the outcomes from that clinical trial? So a transition plan is required. In this case, since there is no budget cap, they do want you to justify what you propose as a budget. They'll ask for that documentation as well. So I think it's unique in that, again, there is no budget cap. So that's unique across the government, as far as I know. but writing to justifying what you propose as that becomes a bit more strategic and a bit more onerous. Finally, there's a funding mechanism called the Focus Program Award. And this is for groupings of projects that are synergistic, multidisciplinary, that sort of span maybe several investigators across, either within the same university or multiple universities or research settings. These may propose several themes on a common project, goal or objective. And you'll need to then explain, how these fit together and why this is a good grouping of investigators to accomplish or push forward, to achieve whatever the objective or goals might be of the study research group. Here, maximum allowable funding is $7.2 million every year. The Congressionally directed medical research programs, the peer-reviewed medical research program, since we're talking about that, award several of these focus program awards. And so they are very held in high regard. They are, the team that is put together needs to be highly qualified. So this is the full professor level or above. And again, this is 7.2 million for direct costs only, and then indirect on top of that. Peer performance, 4 years. Because again, the money is a little bit larger, the requirements of writing a little bit larger. Project narrative, well, the pre-proposal, let me start there again, is again, just that. It's a pre-proposal, not a letter of intent. In this case, you have 6 pages. You would be invited after review of that pre-proposal to submit a full proposal. Without an invitation, you cannot submit a full proposal. That project narrative then becomes 40 pages, and all the other sort of common elements of the peer-reviewed medical research program exist, as described before. There are some additional requirements that if one or more of the projects in this focus program award start to get into clinical study, then there is some additional IND, IDE documentation, regulatory documentation required. I want to talk a little bit about the review process. This is a less understood aspect of the Congressionally directed medical research programs. It's called a 2-stage review process. This is different from anywhere else in the government. So the NIH, for example, will form a study group and have a funding or a cut line. And so the scientifically meritorious proposals above the cut line get funding. That doesn't occur in the Congressionally directed medical research program. First is the peer review process. So is the proposal scientifically meritorious? Similar to the NIH process, but then it goes through a 2nd stage review. How programmatically relevant is that scientifically meritorious proposal? So again, this whole mission-driven theme in this program becomes really important. How have you addressed one or more of the strategic objectives of the neuroscience topic areas? How well have you written toward that? How impactful is that? That is all brought into consideration during the programmatic review. So again, it's not the most scientifically meritorious proposals that get funding in the peer-reviewed medical research program or the Congressionally directed medical research programs more broadly. But it's those meritorious proposals that best meet the programmatic intent of the program itself. So again, those strategic objectives of the neuroscience group will be viewed critically during the 2nd stage, the programmatic review. So tips for success. We should spend a bit of time on this. How do you write a successful proposal? Simply recycling an NIH proposal is a strategy. It's a strategy that I haven't seen be incredibly successful over the years. It can be successful, but you need to repackage really, if you have a prior proposal that you want to recycle some of the writing, and you just need to repackage it. Or you need to write something new. Again, this mission-driven focus of this program becomes really the center of a proposal. So align to the program. Relate your approach to the designated areas. It says areas of encouragement. So in this case, we're talking about topic areas, the neuroscience topic area of which Rett syndrome falls under, and then those strategic objectives within that area. So think critically how you're going to align to one or more of those. Then another characteristic of the DoD managed programs is innovation. So they define this a bit differently than the NIH. It isn't science for science sake. So you're not necessarily trying to, in all cases, advance the understanding of the basic science. But even for the discovery award, sort of postulating how that research may contribute to the broader good or the broader understanding. So the innovation that's occurring becomes important to describe. So allow your viewers to understand, what or how or in what capacity, might the proposed research effort contribute to, translation in the broadest sense, to clinical trials, to standard of care, to understanding the underlying disease mechanisms, and why that's important in advancing this field of research. Again, emphasizing translation. How do you convert research into clinical care? Ultimately, is held in high regard in these programs. Again, it's not basic science for basic science sake. This is how do we translate that knowledge we might generate into something meaningful to impact patient care, the understanding of the disease, and so forth. Take-home messages. So why apply to this program? Well, one, there's an awful lot of money behind the peer-reviewed medical research program. So it offers another opportunity for investigators in the Rett syndrome community to package some of their research ideas to a program that's offering a significant amount of money. That's different from the NIH or other funders out there for you. There's a wide range of topic areas and strategic goals. So this should be able to, if you think broadly about those strategic goals, enable you to design a diversity of research projects across a diversity of research maturities to help meet whatever your interests may be. These can fund some very new, some very undeveloped ideas or very developed ideas. Again, the discovery work, no preclinical or no preliminary data is required for the discovery work. Again, with additional increasing levels of money, additional justification and supports required, but don't be, I should say, you should be persuaded to consider high risk, high reward types of work with some of these mechanisms. The FY21 funding success rate for perspective across all of the peer-reviewed medical research program topic areas range from 12 to 20% across all the funding mechanisms. So it's a little bit greater than that of the NIH. The funding success ranges are not equal across all the topic areas. So, for example, Rett syndrome will not be equally funded to one of the other topic areas within the peer-reviewed medical research program. So those funding success rates range from 0 to 71% in the FY21 program. So it's a pretty good odds if you're in that 71% funding range. So more than one out of every 2 proposals that went in got funded. That's a pretty good odds. The average out to something around 10 to 20% across all of those 49 topic areas. But one can't predict which topic area is going to get a higher funding rate than the others from year to year. They're really based upon how you are meritorious in science, but then importantly address the programmatic relevance. Again, I highlight the discovery award. No preliminary data means no preliminary data. It really does. So explore new ideas. robust response then from the Rett research community can help justify future appropriations. And that's really, really important. As we try to expand the resources available to the Rett research community, we want to be able to point back to Congress that we had a robust response to this program, that there's additional resources that are needed to address a diversity of research, impactful research within this community. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions from the foundation. Otherwise, it was my pleasure to describe the peer-reviewed medical research program today.
Ryan, thank you so much for providing that overview for all of the researchers in the Rett syndrome field. This is really valuable. And I also want to thank Julie and her team, as well as Brian, for all the support that you provided to the International Rett Syndrome Foundation in order to get us to successfully advocate to have Rett syndrome listed as a topic for the FY2022. This is really an excellent opportunity for the Rett syndrome scientific community and to be able to have this as an option. And we really could not have done it without your support. So I do want to acknowledge that and thank you, as well as many in the Rett family and scientific community that followed the guidance that Julie and her team provided us to be successful in this advocacy.
My pleasure. And I'll leave the community with this sort of mantra within the DoD. It's called the bottom line up front. And so some may refer to this as the bluff. And so really think about that as you develop your proposals. The bottom line up front. Tell the reviewers what it is you're going to do. So almost what is the problem and what is the solution? Think in that. Get it on your first page of your proposal. That's different. That's a different way of thinking from development of NIH proposals. They tend to review better within the peer-reviewed medical research program if you tell them, bottom line up front, what is your problem and what is your solution? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pitchard and Dr. Pfister. On that, we will close this presentation. Have a great day.